Welcome to the Finding a Living Donor peer-led workshop for kidney and liver transplant candidates and advocates. We are very excited to have all of you here today. I'm joined with my co-hosts today, Heather and Afsana. And we will introduce these amazing people in a minute. I am Candace. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the Center for Living Organ Donation. The Center for Living Organ Donation was created by UHN Transplant, now the Ajmera Transplant Center, in 2018. And the goal was to improve access to living organ donation for people who need a life-saving kidney or liver transplant and those donors who want to give the transformative gift of life. And those are our two co-founders there, Brendan Cahill on the left and Joanne Kearney on the right. And Brendan donated his kidney to Joanne through the Paired Exchange Program. And they are actually featured on the next Living Transplant podcast episode that will be dropped tomorrow. So you can listen all about their story if you listen to our podcast. These are our incredible committees, and you will notice Heather is in that group as well. This is our ACB Organ Health YouTube committee, our volunteer advisory committee, and our governance committee. And through living donors, recipients, caregivers, care team members, and community partners, we are able to have the success that we do today, and they are involved in every aspect of the work that we do. I would like to start with an acknowledgement that Toronto and the Center for Living Organ Donation at UHN is on the ancestral traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, and in particular the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory we are gathered on today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made and continue to make in shaping and strengthening this community. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our amazing speakers. Our first speaker is Heather Badnock, and I'm not going to read her bio because she is going to tell you all about her story today. She is a non-directed living liver donor and a communication strategist. I am also part of your panel today. I am also a kidney transplant recipient. My mother donated her kidney to me back in 2009. And Afsana Lalani is here with us today, and she is a living liver transplant recipient, and you can hear about her story as well. So I am now going to pass over the mic to Heather and ask her to share her story.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here. May I say that I am in Ottawa, which is on the unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and it's a real pleasure to be with everyone today. Recognize some familiar names. So looking forward to chatting with everyone. I became a living liver donor because I first saw in the paper, as you see on the left in 2016, that young girl that I had never met needed a living donor. I applied to give to her, and wonderfully, thankfully, she got the liver donor that she needed from the dad of one of her school friends. But I asked to stay in the process because if I was already prepared to give to a stranger, then why not leave it up to the transplant team to choose the person who needed it the most? So that's what I did. So for those of you wondering if strangers out there give to people, yes, we do. I had that photo in the center is day 2 after surgery, when I think it's really sinking in emotionally that somewhere there across the street at Sick Kids, there's a little kid that, and hopefully their family, who is breathing a sigh of relief post-transplant. It's a pretty indescribable emotional high to be a donor and to be a part of the team that helps to save someone's life. On the far, I don't know if my mother-in-law knows that I use this photo, but it's basically 2 weeks post-transplant, and we were headed off to a family reunion. I was still being very secretive about my donation and I hadn't told anybody, and managed to go to this family reunion, have nobody, including the 2 nurses present, figure it out, and come back. So that's how good I was feeling 2 weeks post-transplant. So I think what really stands out for me that I wanted to share is that when you put a public appeal out there, as I know many of you on this call are thinking about, Jana Lynn did back in 2016, her life was saved, but then her public appeal drew other people in and saved more lives. So you may not just save your own life, but also the lives of others. Thanks, Candace. Over to, oh, this is still my slide. Okay, can we just say that transplant is a really supportive community. And as part of being a living liver donor, I've over time connected with other people who are living donors. And just like you saw in the beginning and how I offered to connect with Cindy, we do this all the time. A previous donor connects to the next donor. So in these photos at the bottom over beverages, that was my donor, Sarah. On the far right, that's Zubaida. She was the nurse, living liver donor coordinator when I gave. At the top, that's the surgeon who did my surgery, and then the surgeon who did my recipient surgery, and a ton of donor friends. Len at the bottom left has gone on to be not just a liver donor, but a kidney donor as well. In the very, very center, that was taken like 2 weeks ago in Toronto, visiting with Ashley, who is a recipient whose campaign we ran, I don't know, like around 2 years ago. And she's now more than a year post-transplant. So all to say that if you're new to this community, there's a lot of us out here and we're all looking out for each other. Donor, recipient, transplant team, people have each other's back. It's really a nice community to be a part of.
Okay, it's my turn. I'm Afsana, and I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement as well. So I live in Toronto, and Toronto is a dish with one spoon territory, and the dish with one spoon treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and that bound them together, share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and people, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So I'm very glad to be here today with all of you and to share my story. With that said, I am a liver recipient, and I had my transplant in the winter of 2021. I had a very rare autoimmune liver disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis. And I was diagnosed with it around age 16. And 6 years later, I needed a transplant. So you can see in these pictures in front of you that this is my sickest phase or look of my lifestyle before my transplant. I was very homebound and not able to wash my own hair and do other activities of daily living. You can see in the bottom right corner, there's me and my older sister, and she's washing my hair for me. But despite all of my struggles with my health, I still remained in school because I was really determined to still chase after my dreams of becoming a nurse. So I have my picture in my nursing scrubs right there, but I also had my NG tube around that time because I was so underweight. And then some of these other pictures are when I was in the hospital with other side effects or complications of having a failing liver. And you can see how my skin tone really changed from my normal brown complexion to a bit more of a yellow complexion, which in the liver world is called being jaundiced. And this picture in the top right corner of me with the blanket on the couch looking very ill. I had a very bad liver infection around that time, and I wouldn't be able to even walk up a flight of stairs at that point. I would be way too exhausted and severely in pain. And sometimes that would even put me in the hospital as well in need of IV antibiotics and other kind of treatments and monitoring care. And then in the next slide, you'll see my transplant pictures of being in the hospital. Right before I go in, I'm right there in the top right corner. The second picture inwards is me, my mom, and my dad right before I was heading down to the OR. And I was actually not nervous at all the morning of. The night before, I definitely was, and I pulled an all-nighter because I couldn't sleep in the hospital. But the morning that my transplant happened, I was very calm and actually excited for it to be over with, because I was ready to get started on my life and get it all back in order and actually achieve those dreams that I thought I would actually never be able to achieve. So that was really nice. And so you can see around these photos of my transplant experience, I have me almost thriving in life again. So I restarted doing yoga, doing some working out, going for birthday dinners again instead of staying inside all day, and going shopping. And then in the top left corner, you can see me and my two sisters, which are my biggest supports in life and my best friends. And so that was our birthday dinners all together. And I don't think I would have been here today without my family and my support team. So that's why I wanted to include a
Much Afsana and Heather for sharing. So my name is Candace Coughlin, and I am in the Kitchener area. I am situated on land that is traditional home to the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historical connection to this place. I also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made and are continuing to make in shaping and strengthening this community. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to meet here and reaffirm our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in this community. So with that kickoff, I went through a journey of a crash start with a kidney transplant. So I had no prior knowledge of my kidney disease. I was 24 years old and thought I just had a really bad flu. So in the top left, that was me right before my diagnosis. I was extremely underweight and I was very itchy. I had patches of psoriasis. I thought it was psoriasis all through my body, but it was actually the poisons that were not being properly filtered in my body pushing out through my skin. And so I went to get blood work done because I thought I had a flu. And by 2 o'clock in the morning, the hospital was calling my mom, telling her to bring me to emergency right away. So we went to emergency, and within under 24 hours, I was diagnosed with end-stage kidney disease. I had under 5% kidney function. They told me I was knocking on death's door, and I started dialysis. All of that happened in less than a day. And I stayed as an inpatient for about 3 weeks doing hemodialysis every single day. And once I was strong enough, I was able to go home and do hemodialysis in center 3 times a week for about 4 hours. But it just didn't fit my lifestyle for me. So I changed to peritoneal dialysis and I did the night cycler. I did that every night for 8 to 9 hours. And it was much better for me. But again, I was in middle of university, almost finished my degree, and I wanted that freedom back. So through that time, my mom decided that she was going to see if she could be my donor. She went through the process of being tested, and that's her in the bottom left corner. We are at a Beyonce concert just shortly before our transplant. So the two of us went in on September 9th, 2009 to have our kidney transplant. And my mom successfully donated her kidney to me at 9 a.m. So now our favorite number, of course, is 9. And these are just some of the pictures of the amazing things that I've been able to do since I have been transplanted. My husband and I have traveled the world. I finished my degree. We got married. And then 18 months ago, we welcomed our little baby girl into the world. And She was premature. She was only 4 pounds, 10 ounces. But within 5 days, we were able to go home. And as you can see, she is a normal kid. She's messy and crazy and wild. And she brings absolute joy into our lives. And that's my mom in the bottom right corner there with my daughter. They're 2 peas in a pod. And I actually, for Christmas, the year that I was pregnant with her, I gave my mom a photo of the ultrasound, and I have a picture of my kidney right beside my daughter's head. And it's just, to me, it shows the power of organ donation and how much I've been able to do since my mom donated my kidney. So I'm incredibly grateful to my mom and to my whole family and to my husband through this process. And not only am I lucky enough that I have received a transplant, but now I get to be part of the Center for Living Organ Donation and work with people who I'm passionate about supporting. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I hope you enjoy today's session with all of us. So today's agenda, what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about some hesitancies about going public and really thinking about that big discussion about sharing your story. Before we get started, we're going to talk about some of the things that you're going to need for that appeal. We're going to discuss how you create the appeal and how to find champions or ambassadors to support you along that way. Then we're going to talk about deciding where to share. So are you going to do your campaign through email and social media, or you're going to write that appeal? And we'll give you some examples. And then thinking about when and how you'll launch your appeal. We'll have some breakout rooms. And during those breakout rooms, we'll talk about a little bit about what you've learned today, what your situation is, and we'll write one of those draft appeals and share with each other what our draft appeal would be, and we can get feedback from one another. And then we end the day with some useful resources for everyone. We have the little buttons that are available on your screen. I think Heather's already used a couple of them. There's hearts, there's hands up, there's thumbs up. So, thinking about where we begin with sharing your story, hands up, and we can't see your hands, but maybe put the thumbs up button if any of you feel hesitant about sharing your story. And where you're starting, where you're beginning. How do you feel about sharing your story? Are you in a place where you feel comfortable with sharing your story and this is a place to get more resources? Or are you at the beginning of your journey and you're still not quite sure where you're going? So we are going to ask you to answer this question in our poll. So we have launched the poll. It should come up on your screen shortly and asking you where on your journey you are. So I've not started yet. I'm just starting to explore living organ donation or transplantation. I've started the conversation with close friends. I've started a public appeal, or I'm not quite sure where I'm at yet. And great, we are seeing people answer. That's fantastic. So we've got a lot of people who are just starting to explore, some people who haven't started yet, some people who have started the conversation with close families. That's wonderful. So most of our group here, in that 30 and 35%, you're just starting to explore, or you're having that conversation with close family member. That is fantastic. You'll see here what our group is. So that's really great to know where we are, because it can help guide us to bring us to where we want to be. So I'm going to ask you another follow-up question for the poll here. We're going to ask you how comfortable you are with sharing your story. And now this is either for, are you looking to find a living donor, or are you supporting that conversation for someone that you know? So if you're an advocate for someone, or if you are just looking to share your story now. And we've got some great answers coming in. We've got a couple people who are comfortable. Lots of people who are somewhat uncomfortable. And I'll give everybody a couple more seconds here to fill that out. So as much as we don't want you to be uncomfortable, knowing that we have a lot of people here who are somewhat uncomfortable about sharing their story, that's good that you're here. That's what we're here for today. So sharing the results here, the majority of people here are somewhat uncomfortable about sharing their story. So hopefully through this webinar today, Afsana and Heather and I can help you to get to that next step. So where do I begin? We're gonna provide you lots of information today, but from my personal experience, I had to start sharing my health experience with other people. So thinking to yourself, have you been open about what you're going through with your community? Whether you start with your close family and your close friends, or you extend that network. Sometimes thinking about it can be a little bit overwhelming. And as somewhat gross as this is, my dad always says, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So we take tiny little steps to get through that process. And often we think about a lot of these fears that we may have. So how are people going to react when we start to share with them? Are they going to treat me differently? Is this going to change my relationships? We also have fears about the health of the donor. And so when I was going through this process of being told that it was going to take potentially 4 years to find a donor through the deceased donation list, or I could find a living donor myself, I was very lucky because I didn't need to share my story. My mom was there with me and she saw what I was going through, and she stepped up to be my donor. But through that experience, I was very nervous in having my mom go through that experience. And one night my dad sat down with me and he told me that I was being quite selfish in not wanting my mom to be my donor. And I thought I was being really great, that I wanted to protect her and I wanted to protect her health. And he said to me, your mom wants to be your donor because she wants to see you alive and she wants to see you thrive. And don't take that away from her. If she's able to be your donor, let her be your donor. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks, that she hadn't stepped up to be my donor because she felt like she needed to. She stepped up to be my donor because she wanted to be my donor. And she said sometimes selfishly, she was wanting to be my donor because she would have been able to see that she could make that impact and she could make me better. And then she could have a life with me. And so your donors are stepping forward because they want to, and they want to be part of your life and they want to see you thrive. So think about that while you're starting this journey. As uncomfortable as it is to be vulnerable, as uncomfortable it is to share what you're going through and talk about your disease, this is how people know what's going on and how they're able to help you, even in the smallest of ways. So I always start with my why. Why do you want to transplant? And that's different than the need is much different. But when you can also think about what that why is, it's a really great thing to be able to hold on to while you're waiting as well. And it could be something as small as, I want to eat a bunch of potatoes. I miss potatoes. I missed chili, and I ended up eating chili for about 3 weeks post-transplant. It could be something big, like I want to go on a vacation without having to worry about my medication, my dialysis, and all of these schedules. Any of those things, hold on to that why. And so I'm now going to pass it over to our friends to start this conversation.
So if you take a look at the headline in this slide, when you think about who it is that you might want to share your story with. Many people think about sharing their story, and we're going to talk lots about this. Sharing your story with your inner circle, that it's only someone who's like related to you or a lifelong friend who's going to give to you. But this gentleman gave to the recipient in the bed because they went to school together 50 years ago. And so think about your extended network. Think about when you write your appeal, when you start sharing your story. Where did I go to school over the years? And where have I worked? And what is something about me that will help people feel a connection or remember that they know me or encourage a particular community to spread the word? So what a wonderful example of 50 years they hadn't seen each other. And here's the life-changing difference that telling his story made.
And this is another example. This young lady is Claudia, and she had a kidney disease. When she needed a transplant, she shared her health story with her church, and her minister made a social media video about it, and it was shared across the globe. And that's how she was able to find her donor as well, through social media, which was a great story of success.
Okay, so lots of people can tell you why donors want to give theoretically, but can I just tell you from a personal standpoint, as a donor who gave to a stranger, that we want to give so badly. And it comes from the heart. And when I saw little Jana's need in the paper, I signed up immediately. And that snap decision is also completely normal. When I chat with donors who are in the process, who are thinking about giving, or donors who have given, if they've never chatted with a donor before, they'll say, I made the decision really quickly, but the transplant team didn't seem to think that was weird. It's like, no, it's not weird. That's a completely normal thing. Sometimes we have a connection to transplant in some way, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have a connection to the recipient in some way, like Candace's mom who gave to her, for Afsana who received from an anonymous donor, and for me who gave to someone that I don't know. There's just a drive to help. And oftentimes donors have a history of altruism. And so oftentimes living donors are people who are also blood donors. We're also often we're registered as stem cell donors. We maybe volunteer in the community. This is anecdotal, but I think we've all come to believe that many living donors have rescue pets. So we have like rescue dogs, rescued cats, and we just want to help. Also, I feel very lucky. I think that sometimes being born with a really serious disease it's unluck of the draw. But in the luck of the draw, I have good health. And so I think, why wouldn't I share my good fortune with someone who wasn't so lucky? And I've already been a liver donor. A family member of mine has an autoimmune disorder. She has lupus. And so my kidney is reserved for her in case she ever needs it. And I just think that the joy that came with being a donor, and it had been described to me in advance, but it has at 100% still caught me off guard, how amazing it feels afterwards. It's a remarkable gift. So if you're wondering, can I share my story with my friends and family? Will someone want to give? Absolutely. We 100% want to help. The person who steps forward is driven to help you. Different donors share their perspectives. Many of us, that photo is of a scar. The current campaign features scars. Most of us really love our scars, and it's just not this far-fetched thing to us to be donors. If you've ever wanted to be someone's donor, then it's just this incredible, overwhelming desire to want to help and to love that scar afterwards. So there's really cool research. And so when people ask why we gave, I just like to say that my giant amygdala made me do it. And the explanation behind that is this research done by Dr. Abigail Marsh. And so she's a researcher in the US, and she has looked at the brains of people who give kidneys to strangers. She's now expanding her research to include people who gave a part of their liver to a stranger. And it turns out that our amygdala, which this makes sense to me, it's the part of our brain that registers the fear and distress of others. People who give organs to strangers, our amygdala is on average 8% larger. And I like to joke that in the decisions that I make that are helpful, I'm not in charge of those decisions. That's my amygdala. Okay. Your donor does not need to be related to you. We sometimes see advertisements, promotions looking for people to be stem cell donors, and there needs to be like a cultural connection to be a stem cell donor. That is not the case for living organ donors. And so you don't need someone who's related to you. And I think we've really illustrated well so far. Reach beyond your immediate network as your comfort level allows. Start within your immediate network, but when you are comfortable and feel like you are ready to do, feel free to reach beyond, because you don't know if your classmate from 50 years ago is going to give to you. Oh, okay. How much do we love this story? So this is another one where people who were, I don't know, indirectly connected, where people who, one person runs a hot dog stand and the other guy's his customer, and donated a kidney. So we're going to go through an exercise where we talk about, you're going to think about all the people that you interact with. So think about the restaurant that you go to all the time and the hot dog vendor, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, now we're going to go through how you even ask anyone out there to be your donor. It's really hard for patients, especially like myself, when you're sick and struggling for so long and you already feel like a burden to everyone around you. So you don't want to ask for more, especially something as big as an organ piece or part. But what I realized through my process is you're not technically asking someone to come forward to be your donor for their organ. You're actually just asking for them and you to have an information exchange between each other and sharing the opportunity to the right people out there. And hopefully that will create or promote you enough so that someone does come forward for you. It doesn't have to specifically be that one person you're targeting to ask. You are just asking people to really just spread the word around you. The more awareness and advocacy you do for yourself, the faster and wider your campaign will spread, and that will benefit you in the long run. And an important part of it is the role of your champions around you. They are your biggest supports, so it would make sense that they would help you spread the word as well. So the first steps in the process is something that you have to consider within yourself of why you really want to have that transplant. For me, it took a lot of back and forth of this is a really scary process, and I don't know if I really want to put myself out there in the world in such a vulnerable position and let everyone know that I'm this sick and need something large from them. It was a really hard ask for me, but it's something that really needs to be shared. So I really sat down and thought about it for a minute and was like, yes, I do want this transplant. I want this because I want to reach all of my goals in life. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I want to be there to see my sisters get married. I want to be a bridesmaid or a maid of honor. That would be amazing, like opportunity. I want to be a nurse. So there are a lot of things in my life that I want to reach and do. And that's why I wanted that transplant. And so I had to keep that in mind and make sure that I remembered those pieces to include in my campaign post so that others understand what your mindset is at that time. Then you want to make sure you think about your family when you're thinking about why you want that transplant, and make sure you include that as well. You want to also find a champion for yourself, someone who can really be behind you and be part of your team and volunteer with you to look for the right type of media campaign you want to go through with. It's something I couldn't do alone because I was very sick and needed more support than I would like to admit. And so I did find support within my family, and Heather also really helped me with my campaign as well, which I did on Facebook because no one in my family was a blood match. So I already started piecing together my own personal team for my campaign. And then I really sat down and thought about, where do I want to share this? Who do I want to share this with? And how much do I want to share? Those are very important aspects because you have to think about your own privacy, how much you want to share with people. And you have to think about how exposed you want to be in the world. So whether you want to go through the route of just sending an email to a handful of people or some work colleagues, or if you want to be a little bit more widespread than that, like on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, those kind of platforms. You could even be on TV. And so that's something you need to consider as well. And then the who part I really thought about was everyone, because I want to transplant as soon as possible. So the wider it goes, the faster it'll happen. And so that's why I thought about the level of public that I was comfortable in sharing with and made sure it went very far. But I didn't really want that at first. I was very shy at the beginning, and I started with just an email to my immediate family so that I can find out if my family could be a match instead of having to go in a wider scope there to asking publicly. And then I needed to make sure that the word that I was spreading was the right words, and Heather really helped with communicating those wordings properly and to include everything I needed to include so that everyone would have enough information about how to go about this process if they wanted to go down that road. But I needed to make sure that my medical and personal information was still a little bit protected to keep me safe in the eyes of social media.
That's the perfect lead in to this slide. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my day job is as a communications strategist, and I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm currently the press secretary for one of the people in Ottawa running to be mayor, leading candidate running to be mayor, may I say. So I tend to have a lot of experience running campaigns, and there is some information that we need to get, that you need to get from your transplant team before you can start. And as Afsana said, you can start small and private and keep it within, whether you keep it small or large, you still have to start with the right information. And this you need to get from your transplant team. So here's your checklist. So make sure that you are actually on the transplant list. It happens from time to time that someone thinks they're listed, but they're actually not quite listed yet. Make sure that if you're helping someone else, that they are in fact on the transplant list. And then make sure that you're really clear on the blood type that you can receive from. So for example, if you are looking for a kidney, there's something in Canada called the Kidney Paired Donation Program. And that means that if someone comes forward who wants to donate to you, isn't a match, maybe isn't the right blood type, but they're healthy enough to be a kidney donor and they can be accepted as a kidney donor through this wonderful system that we have in Canada, you can still receive a donation. So if you are looking for a kidney, a person of any blood type can apply to be your donor. So please don't do an appeal that says, I'm A positive, I need A positive. That's not the case. And please, if you have questions about this, we can maybe bring them up in the breakout room, or you can discuss with your transplant team. So kidney paired donation is what you want to learn a little more about. And then if you are a liver recipient, then the blood type does matter. Liver paired donation is extraordinarily rare. The first one in North America was 4 years ago. And if you have, say, a positive blood type, your donor doesn't necessarily need to be A positive, right? You could have A positive, A negative, O positive, O negative. So please confirm with your transplant team, not just what your blood type is, but all of the different blood types that you can receive from, because that's a different question, right? And then make sure that you identify, maybe most of you are going to get your transplant at UHN, maybe some of you aren't. And so make sure that you include in your appeal how the transplant center wants to be contacted with questions from potential donors. So for UHN, those questions get directed to the Center for Living Organ Donation, which is actually different from the living donor transplant teams. So it's the center that wants to receive the questions. And then also make sure that what the living donor application process is, so that when you're thinking about writing your messages and starting to spread the word, along with blood type, one of the top questions you're going to get is, how do I apply? So make sure that you know that for your center. And then Afsana just made excellent points about assembling the team and how the team comes together. And so Afsana made sure, so Afsana has friends who are very influential on social media. That helped to spread the word. I was a volunteer who's really great with communications, comfortable writing, and social media savvy. So together we ran what was a very public appeal for Afsana. Next slide. So before we start writing our email to friends, social media post, whatever it is, so first you get all this information that you need from your transplant team. Then you think about the lead. So we talk about, with journalists, not burying the lead. And when we say don't bury the lead, what we mean by this is, if you're reading a newspaper article, a web article, the story gets summarized in like the first 2 or 3 sentences right up top, and then you go into the full story. All too often, what we see when people are spreading the word about their need for a donor is that they do what's called burying the lead. They tell this long 2-page story about their health history and where they're at and how they're feeling. This is all really relevant information. And then you build up to end of page 1, page 2, that you need a living donor. But too many people have stopped reading at that point. So get right up top in those first couple of sentences, I need a living liver donor. The blood types I can receive from are this. I am in Ottawa. The transplant's going to happen in Toronto. And I'll tell you why you state the city right up top. Because when you hope, I think about having really influential friends like Afsana, that campaign spreads so far and wide that you want to make sure that when someone sees that appeal, they know where you are. Is this Afsana in Paris? Is this Afsana in Texas? Is this Afsana in Toronto? And so right up top, this is Afsana outside Toronto, and my donation is going to be in Toronto. And then think about including your hobbies and interests. And we have a couple of slides coming up that are going to make the point about why, and how when someone feels that connection to you, maybe they've never met you, maybe you didn't go to school together 50 years ago, but you both love cycling, or you are a retired nurse and that helps other retired nurses out there or current nurses feel a connection to you and spread the word. And then always include in every single thing you post, whether it's your initial story or it's your second story or it's your first email, it's your second email, every time you share your story, here's how to get more information. Here's how to apply to be my donor. That's critical every single time. All right, so we've talked about this, right? Don't bury the lead. I think we've made this point. Oh, you know what? I've said all of this except for the reimbursement program. Make sure that you know for your province what the reimbursement program looks like. For example, in Ontario, we have something called I know the acronym PRELOD, but essentially it's through the Trillium Gift of Life, and it's a reimbursement program for people who are living donors. And it's up to $5,500 currently. Someone shake their head at me if that's not the most up-to-date information. And for someone who applies to be your donor, who goes through the screening process, regardless of how far they get in the screening process, they can keep their receipts and are eligible to have travel, accommodation, food, parking. There's a number of expenses that they would be eligible to have reimbursed. So if someone lives far from the city where the donation or testing would happen, it can be helpful for them to know that they could be reimbursed. Nobody makes money being a donor, but you can get your expenses back. So we've talked about the importance of sharing your hobbies and your interests, but also share about yourself. Afsana has told us in a really compelling way, Candace as well. Candace had a crash start, but you experienced needing to be on dialysis and how that impacted your life. Afsana shared how the decline in health over time impacted your ability to wash your hair and the things that you were both looking forward to and have done post-transplant. So you can share as you spread your story, what the waiting is like, and then also what your dreams and aspirations are post-transplant. You are so much more than your illness. Your illness is a critical and central part of your life right now. And as a recipient, it will always be a part of you, but you are so much more than that. So share those dreams for beyond transplant. And it's also good to share that a healthy person can live with one kidney and that the liver grows back relatively quickly, in fact. Okay, so we're going to have two story examples. Building on what we've just discussed about the critical information to share, putting the really important information summarized at the top, right? Don't bury the lead. This is a good story example in that it's compelling about Vanessa. She's a daughter, she's a sister, she has a rescue pet. She works in childcare. She's clearly a giving person. She's got PSC, and you can decide to share or not share your underlying disease. That's your personal health information. Do you know what's missing here? So in that previous slide, what was missing was information about blood type, information about age, how to apply. There's a bunch of stuff that's missing. So you don't know how to become her donor, even though it's a really compelling story. Here's a much better story. And so if you take all this information with blood type, donation is going to be in Toronto, liver regenerates, how to apply, etc., then if you put the compelling information into here, then you are going to have a much higher chance of success. Think about these as basic starter templates. There are also other templates available. Afsana is going to walk us through her social media appeal and everything it included. Oh, perfect. You know what? This is the perfect time to go back to Afsana because you're going to illustrate all this and bring it together.
Okay. Here you can see my Facebook post that we just inserted into this slide for you. On the left-hand side, you can see the picture that we put with the post. And we chose one that was with my family because that's the most important thing to me in my life, and something that would show that I'm surrounded by people who love me and that I love them, and a reason to help me and to stay in this family. So then I also have my first name and last name bolded in that title, so everyone can be drawn attention right to my name and know that's me who needs it. And I indicated in bold the liver donor that I'm looking for, so people don't think I'm looking for a kidney. And in the smaller font right under the title, we have Oakville-based nursing student needs a donor with blood type O positive, O negative, A positive, or A negative. Here we chose to put my location where I'm from, what I do for a living, and the blood type that I'm looking for. When we're writing the blood types out, you should make sure that you separate the O positives and negatives, A positives and negatives. Don't put a slash negative positive, because it can confuse some people who are not as tech savvy or as English based as we are. So we want to make sure that we clearly state every single type we need and are looking for. That would work. And on the post part of it, with all that writing, it does look a little overwhelming when you look at it at first. I get it. But you know, what we decided, as Heather said before, when you start with the lead, it has all the key information that you need in it. And that's the part that really is exposed in the post until you click the see more button, which expands the entire post and you see everything then. And having it done like that will then give a quick little snippet of what you need and immediately the things that you're looking for, your name, the liver, the blood type, which is all in that first paragraph I have here. Similar to the template that Heather showed you on the last slide. Then I also have the location of the transplant there that Heather mentioned as well. Toronto General Hospital is where I had mine. And then I continued my post. If people are interested in this kind of topic, then they would click see more and read the rest of the post, which has more of a personal story behind why I need my liver. And so it goes through my life of being a university student, fighting for my life and trying to reach my goals of becoming a nurse at Sick Kids. And it talks about how I'm very family based and how I have 2 sisters and a cat named Luna. And it continues to go through some of my symptoms, the disease I had, a little bit more of an in-depth insight into who I am. And here is where I got to choose how much I wanted to share about myself and how to present myself. So you don't have to worry about a post going out about you and you don't have any say about it, because it is your words that is there ultimately in the end, and it's your choice what you include or not. And if you go closer to the bottom of the post, it's the call to action where we state, I need help. And it's not a bad thing to ask for help. I learned through my illness. At first, I thought that I shouldn't be asking for help. I can do it on my own and I'm an independent person. And I always used to say to my parents, no, I can do it. I'm an independent adult now. Like, I'm 23. I just became an independent adult and I am actually not fully independent. My parents are still very helpful to me in life, and I have a whole medical team behind me and school team behind me, family, friends. So really, I don't think anyone in this world can be considered independent if you have an amazing support system like I do. So you're not asking for help, you're just calling on your support team. And that's something I really had to understand. And then at the bottom, I put some resources and by just stating, learn more and apply to be Afsana's donor. And then I included a bunch of links and hashtags at the bottom. Hashtags are important because it helps to draw awareness to your post and make it spread a little bit more than without the hashtag, because it's a quick link that they can click on to lead you to the information that you're looking for. Then here is the kind of stats of how far my campaign post went and the performance of it. And you can see that some of my posts reached quite a number of people with comments and shares. And it also tells you, depending on whether you sign up for the business Facebook. For me personally, I did on Facebook with a business profile. And with the business profile, it tells you more details like how far your post can reach in the comments and shares. But I like here that it shows you how many people clicked on it as well. And if you go down to the more details later, it goes more in depth, like how many people were no longer attracted to the post as well. So then you can know what you did well and where you can improve. Heather?
Can I jump in with what one of the things that was so incredible about this is the performance of one post. So this is the performance of the post that went up first that all of the long detail. And it might be really easy to focus on like the 59,000 people reached, but the most critical statistic here is actually the 350 link clicks. And that is an incredibly wonderfully high number. The link in that post takes you to the website to apply. And so while it's nice to think that 60,000 people saw this, that 350 gave us a tremendous amount of hope that 350 people were interested enough to click through and learn more. Okay, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. And moving forward, you can also tap into your friends and family's socials. You just need to reach out to them and they can help you spread the word through their own social media accounts, like sharing and commenting and liking your posts. And then they can also post on other platforms that you may not have. So for example, I personally don't have Twitter. And I had a friend in university in one of my classes with me who does have Twitter, and she happens to have a very large following. And so on the left-hand side, you can see the post she posted. Her name is Melissa. And Melissa shared this and got 120.6K. She has that many followers. And so that's how many people saw the post. And so I was shocked at how much that also pulled in. It was quite a large amount. And after that, we had so many people in line for being testing for my donor. So I just wanted to stress the importance of finding those friends around you who may have other accounts that you don't have and can help spread the word even more. I know personally for mine, I was getting messages from the campaign Facebook account that I had, and those people were from all over the world. So it was really cool to see that someone from China or Europe or Africa, India, they all wanted to help me. And at the time during COVID, it was a bit different. I couldn't accept organs outside of Canada. And I tried to make sure that those responses stayed in the inbox. And I only responded to the ones that were within Canada to donate to me. And really those responses were just to say, hey, yeah, this is the link to help me. And here is my picture that just happened recently for the Great Actions Leave a Mark campaign. And you can see here, I'm almost fully recovered from my transplant and my scar is pretty big and noticeable there. But I did this campaign because I was very passionate about the cause, and my scar is a mark and it is a reminder of everything I've been through. And it was quite a journey, a very difficult, bumpy journey for sure. But it really is a reminder of my strength and perseverance through adversity. So I like to have this picture now to look at to see like my glowingness, how far I've come. And the fact that I'm way more healthier looking in this picture really shows that and how happy I am.
And if you want to learn more about the Great Actions campaign, we have a bunch of stories about living organ donors, liver and kidney, and recipients. And you can look at all their photos, read their stories, and watch their videos at greatactions.ca.
Okay, so now deciding who to share with is a bit of a tricky one, especially if you are nervous to share your story. You want to brainstorm your network. That's really important to start thinking about who's in your circle, like your community, neighbors, coworkers, groups, any affiliations, and think about your faith and whether you're part of a church or any sort of faith community really is great to help spread the word as well. And for me, I considered social media as well. And you want to involve your family and friends and to tell them about living donation and the best pathway to transplantation in case they were wondering. And identify any family members to help you search as well, because it's not something that can really be done alone. You need the support. Trust me, it can get overwhelming.
So this is a little activity that we've done in the past, and we will send you this so that you can try it on your own. But I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions today. So this is a list of 100 random people that could be in your network. There's people from bakers and salespeople, Chamber of Commerce members, landlords, painters, your dentist. You never know who could be your donor. And this is a really great way to start to think about how large that network actually is, because often we may sit down and think, I only have 1 or 2 people who I know who I could talk to about this. But this is a very large group of people who want to know about you, who want to know how you're doing. And this is a great way to share with them, to think about all of these people. So while you're sharing, we also want you to think about protecting yourself. So make sure that you know what you're going to share. Prepare everything before you're doing this. You don't have to share everything. You share what you would like Afsana spoke about. Think about having somebody share on your behalf as well, having people support that campaign like Afsana's talked about. When potential donors come forward, they do not need to interview you. They do not need to speak to you. This is your campaign. This is all about you and your journey and what your needs are. If the donors want to go through this process, they can go through the hospital and ask those questions to those teams, or they can come to us at the center and ask us those questions. And also a reminder that no one should ever ask for incentives. Organ donation is based purely on altruism, and it is illegal in Canada for any kind of incentives. Some of the things to keep in mind: we don't have all of the answers. So as potential recipients, we may not know the answers to questions. So direct them to resources like the Center for Living Organ Donation, the Ajmera Transplant Center. Think about who those people would be best to answer those questions. Unless you are a transplant surgeon, I would suggest do not give any medical advice. The donor assessment will determine who will donate, and they will go through a process of explaining all of the risks and what this process is going to be like. And those candidates can withdraw at any time, and their privacy will be respected. So if they decide that they're not interested in donating anymore, or they feel they're unable to, the team will not let the recipient know why they have withdrawn. They will just let them know that they're no longer in the process. The transplant centers cannot share how many potential donors have come forward, but what they can do is they can let you know if there are applicants and if somebody is being worked up, so that you can know if you need to continue on your search. And most importantly, stay positive and keep sharing, because your donor will come. It may take some time, but they are out there. Another thing to think about is not everybody is able to be a living donor, and not everybody who is able to donate. So only 4 out of 5 living organ donors are actually not approved and not able to be living organ donors. So that's a lot of people who may come forward and not be able to be your donor. But everyone can be a champion. Everyone can support your cause. Everyone can share your information. And so finding those advocates and those ambassadors through your networks who may be able to share, that's a really great way of involving them if they want to help you. So at this stage, I would like you to think about what level of public are you feeling comfortable with? Are you feeling comfortable with an email within your workplace or your community that could be forwarded to others? Are you comfortable with a public Facebook page that could be potentially seen by thousands? Would you be comfortable with a media interview that could be seen by potentially hundreds of thousands? Or are you not feeling comfortable with any of these right now? And after you think about that, we want to bring you back to thinking about the community and to your networks. So this is an example of a gentleman named Wes who shared his story in looking to find a liver donor. And one thing that Wes was very passionate about was his cycling. And so he shared these examples about his journey and what he was going through and how he was looking for a living donor. And the cycling community got behind him and supported him in such a remarkable way. The cycling community shared his posts, and as you can see, he shared photos of him cycling as well. And great news that he actually did find a living donor. A wonderful story to show that you never know which community is going to come together and to support you through this journey of finding a living donor. And these are some other examples of how people shared their stories. And so Pam shared her story, and she was a former nurse. And that nursing community really rallied around Pam and helped her to find a living donor as well. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there were people who were interested, who were former nurses. I'm a retired nurse too. This is my blood type. I'm a former RN who's had a few needle sticks. I'd love to know where and how I could do this. So as you can see, you never know where the connection is going to come from. And so sharing that about who you are and what your story is can really help to find your donor. So thinking about what have you tried? Have you already shared with close friends and family? That's normally the very first step that we encourage because that's normally the easiest place to start. Have you shared with colleagues, your community organizations, and that extended family and that extended network that you have? Have you shared with Facebook or social media? And have you reached out to the traditional media or had a media interview? Or have you not tried anything yet? So thinking about using traditional and social media to find a donor, there are many pros and cons to this. Some of the pros are that it is a very effective way to share an appeal quickly with a large group of people in your network and beyond. So that post can be shared by so many people and you never know where that post is going to end up. It is generally little to no financial cost. So social media is free unless you want to boost your posts, which is fantastic to be able to share in that way. And like I said, this appeal could be shared and reshared to gain traction on its own. So once it's out there, you never know who's going to see it and want to share it. And then our transplant community is very active on social media. So if you find Facebook groups that you can participate in, there are many people on those Facebook groups and in those communities that would be happy to share and support you through this journey.
So there are some cons to using traditional and social media to find your donor. One thing to really consider is your privacy. You are disclosing your own personal health information, which is a very private thing for a lot of people. And it's something that you don't have to disclose to a extreme amount. You can say how much you want to say. Keep in mind that your information will be out there. And that also includes information about your family and your work life and other sensitive information around you. Because this is really a story about who you are and why you want to stay in this world. This is your information to share. Once it's made public, you have no control over how it will be used and where it will go and who will see it. So that's something really important I want to stress, because when I did my social media campaign on Facebook, it did track a lot of attention and I did get lots of messages on my donor campaign Facebook reaching out to me, trying to get to know me more, some kind of comments I wouldn't really appreciate from a human being in the public that I wouldn't know about or who I wouldn't know at all. And so it was really uncomfortable sometimes for me that all of these strangers know so much about me. And they're all of a sudden approaching me, some with more flirty kind of comments and some that were just not appropriate. And I also got a stalker, surprisingly, and that started online at first, where they followed all of my media accounts, which is okay if they aren't bothering you and you aren't reciprocating any sort of response or anything. If you don't want to talk to them, you don't have to talk to them. And then this person eventually did find out where I was one night at a hangout, but that was something I was able to de-escalate really well on my own and remove myself from the situation and proceed to block them on all of the accounts I had. And there's always the police if you need to report something like that. They're always there to support us when it comes to others breaching our privacy. So make sure you really consider some of the things that you do want to share on social media if you're going to go through with this.
Wow, thank you, Afsana. And thinking about where you share, remember consent always. We've talked about that today a few times. Be considerate of the others who are involved in your story and respect their privacy. If you are taking pictures or recordings for your campaign, make sure that you have permission from all of those individuals who are in your pictures or videos or are sharing their voice. Your family and your friends, as well as hospital staff and other patients, have the right to privacy as well. And when you're thinking about if you receive contact from a potential donor, we do want to enforce protecting anonymity. So if you receive a donation from an anonymous living donor or deceased donor, please don't share the specific time and date of your surgery. And that's to respect the privacy of those involved. If they decide that they are going to step forward and say who they are and when they donated, that's their choice. But in Ontario and Canada, we legally protect the anonymity of deceased donors, and we do not share any of their information. And with anonymous living donors as well, we do not share the dates or who they are or where they have come from. We protect the identity of all of our non-directed living donors, as well as the identity of the deceased donors and their families as well.
Now, when you want to set up yourself for success on social media, you want to make sure to create a page or a new account instead of your own personal account. That's why I refer to my page as the campaign page for myself. I will always say, oh, that's my donor campaign page. Oh, I check out my Facebook campaign page, something like that. And it has your name still attached to it. So it's not at all yours, like ever. It's still part of you. And if you create a new email address to send out some of those campaign emails, that's great too. So it doesn't go into your personal email account. So you'll be able to have that work-life balance almost, and create a schedule to keep things manageable. I try to post on my campaign page updates throughout my progression when I was listed, so that if others saw, or even my donors saw it, they would get to see what's going on with my story and how I was really desperately in need of someone coming to my rescue. And that's why I posted weekly or monthly at some point a update about my health. And that was easier to have with a schedule. So don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need help managing any of these things, there are people around you that are always there for you. Now, some of the examples of where to share I have outlined here. There's newsletters, blog posts, and speaking to class that are some unconventional ways of sharing, which I went through. I did a newsletter for CBC News, and that was a project that they came to me for. They first posted on Twitter asking for people in experience with transplantation during COVID. And I thought, hey, that's me. So I responded back to an email to them. And that's how I put myself into the public eye in a different way. And for blog posts, I was also in blog posts with different charitable campaigns. And they would send out a blog or a newsletter, like weekly almost, to their followers. And they would feature me and my story just because I reached out to them. They wouldn't have known about my story if I didn't say, hey, hi, I'm here, to everyone. Then I also spoke to my class. That was something really easy to figure out. I just went up to my teacher one day and said, hey guys, like I'd love to speak on my experience, and considering I'm in a medical field degree, nursing, I thought that this would be fitting for X, Y, and Z class. And they were all for it, and that's how I inserted myself that way. But I spoke more towards my health in a nursing perspective instead of my experience. But then the second half of my speech, I did speak from a patient perspective so that my students around me would be able to understand both sides of being both a medical professional and a patient. So when you're speaking, if you want to speak, I would urge you to speak from both a professional level of your professional background and from your own experience as well. In doing it that way, then you get to call on different kinds of brains out there and show people who you really are, not just the sick person on the webinar. And here is a donor who was on the Globe and Mail. She donated a kidney and was anonymous, but then she proceeded to post on a blog with the Mail because she works for them. And it really just went through her story and how amazing it was. So that is another example of how she kind of combined her experiences with her job to help kind of draw awareness to her story. Now for final thoughts, we wanted to summarize that you all need to remember to tell your story. It's not an ask, but it is something that's very essential to include. And there are lots of advocates and champions around you that can always help you spread the word and support you throughout all of this. And not just on the platform that you post on, but on all platforms and all kinds of help, like helping you manage, schedule, respond to messages on your page, and even just be an emotional support for you.
And remember, before you get started, to get the facts from your transplant team so that when you do post or when you do share, you're able to share your health information that is up to date and share that with your community. Remember to not bury the lead. And what we mean by that is state right up front what you're looking for. This is what you're going through. This is your need, and this is how people can support you.
Then also to remember that once you are listed and your campaign is up and running, the search for a donor does take time and patience. It usually is a lengthy process, and for me, it took 9 months to find my donor, but over a year to go through the entire process. And living donors want to donate. We know there are lots of them out there, and they would even give again if they could and are able. So don't lose hope in that time frame and wait. It's important to hold on to that.
And as we've said today, and Afsana said as well, there is a community of support out there ready to help. We are part of your community of support. Please reach out to us and reach out to your family and your friends and that group that you have who supports you in your day-to-day things, because there are people who want to help. And again, it says your cause, but please remember that you are worthy. And you are worthy of asking for the life that you want. And that includes finding a living donor. So please never, ever think that you are not worthy of doing this. This is your life and your health, and people want to help. So don't forget that. So at the end of our journey here today, we want you to think about, after listening to this, from where you started with at the beginning of the presentation to now, how comfortable are you now sharing your story to find a living donor or support a living donation conversation as an advocate? Are you still very uncomfortable? Are you somewhat uncomfortable, uncertain, somewhat comfortable, or now very comfortable? And our goal today was to maybe bring you one step closer to that very comfortable place. We have lots of resources at the Center for Living Organ Donation, and we want to help you. We have informal Q&A sessions that happen. We have every week, we have a different Tuesday series. So we have Tuesday series about finding a living donor. So similar to what we did today. We have a series about financial support for potential donors. We have a series about information for potential kidney donors and liver donors. And then once a month on Wednesdays, we have a caregiver webinar support as well. And then we also have different topics each month that we focus on. So we have webinars about the first 100 days post-surgery. We have webinars about pregnancy and transplant. We have webinars about the process of living donation and lots of other things on our YouTube channel. We also will provide you with an email template that you can customize with key messages. We have a social media and public's appeal PDF that we will send. We have an incredible online resource library that you can take a look at as well. And then don't forget to follow us on social media at GiveLifeUHN. And we have lots of information on there, as well as our Living Transplant podcast. And there are episodes every 2 weeks that are released. We also have many supports through the Center for Living Organ Donation. We have information and referrals. So by phone or by email, you can reach out to us. Our email is livingorgandonation@uhn.ca. As I spoke to in the last slide, we have education for patients and donors and families. And we can also do one-on-one education. So if you take a look at the Eventbrite at givelifeuhn.eventbrite.ca and you don't see something there that you're looking for, reach out to us. We have peer support. So if you'd like to speak to somebody who's been through something similar to you, we can connect you. We have topical workshops and presentations. We do community outreach. We have public awareness campaigns. Our newest campaign that Afsana and I were just part of is called the Great Actions Leave a Mark campaign. And it showcases beautiful photography and videos and stories of living organ donors and living organ recipients and how that process was like and how that was so life-changing. And you can see that campaign at greatactions.ca. And then we do lots of research on advocacy on access and equity issues as well. So this is our contact information at the Center for Living Organ Donation at UHN. You can reach out to us on social media at GiveLifeUHN. You can email us at livingorgandonation@uhn.ca. You can visit our website at livingorgandonation.ca or the uhnTransplant.ca website. And you can always give us a call at 416-340-5400. Today, we want to give special thanks for the support that we have gotten from our founders, Joanne Kearney, Brendan Cahill, Kearney and Cahill families, the UHN Foundation, as well as our incredible presenters today. Thank you so much to Afsana and Heather for all of your support and your hard work through this presentation. We truly appreciate everything you have done for us. And happy Living Donation Week to everyone. Thank you so much.